Today we're going to read a book called Teammates: How Two Men Changed the Face of Baseball. Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese, written by Peter Golenbock and illustrated by Paul Bacon. Once upon a time in America, when automobiles were black and looked like tanks, and laundry was white and hung on clotheslines to dry, there were two wonderful baseball leagues that no longer exist. They were called the Negro Leagues. The Negro Leagues had extraordinary players, and adoring fans came to see them wherever they played. They were heroes, but players in the Negro League didn't make much money, and their lives on the road were hard. Laws against segregation didn't exist in the 1940s. In many places in this country, black people were not allowed to go to the same schools and churches as white people. They couldn't sit in front of a bus or a trolley car. They couldn't drink from the same drinking fountains that white people used. Back then, many hotels didn't rent rooms to black people, so the Negro players slept in their cars. Many towns had no restaurants that would serve them, so they often had to eat meals that they could buy and carry with them. Life was very different for the players in the major leagues. There were leagues for the white players. Compared to the Negro League players, they were very well paid. They stayed in good hotels, they ate in fine restaurants, their pictures were put on baseball cards, and the best players became famous all over the world. Joe DiMaggio, Ty Cobb, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, and Ted Williams, just to name a few. Many Americans knew that racial prejudice was wrong, but few dared to openly challenge the way things were, and many people were apathetic about racial problems. The general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers was a man by the name of Branch Rickey. He was not afraid of change. He wanted to treat the Dodger fans to the best players he could find, regardless of the color of their skin. He thought segregation was unfair, and he wanted to give everyone, regardless of race or creed, an opportunity to compete equally on the ball fields of America. But to do this, they needed one special man. Branch Rickey launched a search for him. He was looking for a star player in the Negro Leagues who would be able to compete successfully despite threats on his life or any attempts to injure him. He would have to possess the self-control not to fight back when opposing teams tried to intimidate him. If this man disgraced himself on the field, Rickey knew that his opponents would use it as an excuse to try to keep black players out of the Negro Leagues for many years. Rickey thought Jackie Robinson might just be the man. Jackie rode the train to Brooklyn to meet Mr. Rickey. When Mr. Rickey told him, "I want a man with the courage not to fight back," Jackie Robinson replied, "If you take this gamble, I will do my best to perform." They shook hands, and Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson were starting what would be known in history as the Great Experiment. Jackie Robinson would wear number 42. Spring training with the Dodgers, Jackie was mobbed by blacks, young and old, as if he were a savior. He was the first black player to try out for a major league team. If he succeeded, others would follow. But initially, life with the Dodgers was for Jackie a series of humiliations. The players on his team who came from the South, men who were taught to avoid black people since childhood, moved to another table whenever he sat near them. Many opposing players were cruel to him, could be calling him names from the dugouts, and so sometimes Jackie Robinson felt very alone and sat by himself on the bench. Despite all the difficulties, Jackie Robinson didn't give up. he made the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team. And there he is in the first row. But making the Dodgers was only the beginning. Jackie had to face abuse and hostility throughout the season. His worst pain was inside. Often he felt very alone. Sometimes he had to live by himself on the road because only the white players were allowed in hotels in the towns where they played. The whole time Pee Wee Reese, the Dodgers shortstop, was growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, he rarely ever saw a black person unless it was in the back of a bus. Many of his friends and relatives didn't like the idea of him playing on the same field as a black man. In addition, Pee Wee Reese had more to lose than the other players when Jackie joined the team. Jackie had been a shortstop, and everyone thought Jackie would take Pee Wee's job. Lesser men might have felt anger toward Jackie, but Pee Wee was different. He told himself, if he's good enough to take my job, he deserves it. When his Southern team circulated a piece of paper to throw Jackie off the team and asked him to sign it, Pee Wee responded, I don't care if this man is black, blue, or striped, and he refused to sign. He can play and he can help us win. That's what counts. Very early in the season, the Dodgers traveled west to Ohio to play the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati was near Pee Wee's hometown of Louisville. The Reds played on a smaller park where the fans sat close to the field. The players could almost feel the breath of the fans on their backs of their neck. Many who came that day screamed hateful things at Jackie when the Dodgers took the field. And more than anything else, Pee Wee Reese believed that what he was doing was right. When he heard the fans yelling at Jackie, he decided to take a stand. With his head held high, Pee Wee walked directly from shortstop to first base where Jackie was playing. The taunts and shouting were ringing in his ears. It saddened him because he knew these could be his friends and neighbors. Pee Wee's legs felt heavy, but he knew what he had to do. He walked toward Jackie wearing the gray Dodger uniform, looked into his teammates' bold, pained eyes. The first baseman had done nothing to provoke the hostility except he sought to be treated as an equal. Jackie was grim with anger. Pee Wee smiled broadly as he reached Jackie, and Jackie smiled back. Stopping beside Jackie, Pee Wee put his arm around Jackie's shoulders. An audible gasp rose from the crowd when they saw what Pee Wee had done. There was silence. Outlined in a sea of green grass stood two great athletes, one black, one white, wearing the same uniform. I am standing by him, Pee Wee said to the world. This man is my teammate. The end. That was a great story about a great player, Jackie, and his good friend Pee Wee, and how they were awesome teammates. Hope to see you soon.